I can still hear his voice. Low. Controlled. The kind of tone that told me it was worse than yelling. I saw you. Don't you dare lie to me. That was my husband's voice in the kitchen that night, the night my life cracked wide open. But before I get to that moment, I have to tell you how it started. How a harmless favor turned into a decision that would burn down my marriage, my friendships, and a piece of myself I can never get back. Amanda was my best friend. We met in our mid-20s at a volunteer event, and from there, we were inseparable. We vacationed together, swapped recipes, hosted joint holiday dinners. She knew everything about me, or at least, she thought she did. Amanda was married to Chris. Tall, broad shoulders, the kind of easy charm that made people naturally lean in when he talked. He wasn't the best friend's husband I secretly pined after, at least not then. He was just Chris, Amanda's husband, the guy who grilled burgers at backyard parties and made us laugh until we cried. Then Amanda told me she had to travel for work. 3 weeks, she said, sighing over coffee at my kitchen counter. I hate leaving Chris alone that long, but it's not optional. Could you maybe check in on him? Make sure he's eating something other than frozen pizza. Of course I said yes. That's what friends do. The first week was nothing. I'd stop by after work, drop off a casserole or leftovers, maybe stay for 10 minutes while he asked about Amanda. It was normal. Harmless. The second week, it changed. It was a Thursday night, raining so hard the streets shimmered under the streetlights. I had brought over lasagna, and instead of handing it off at the door, Chris waved me inside. Stay for a drink, he said. It's miserable out there. I should have said no, but the sound of rain on the roof, the smell of garlic and cheese, the warm glow of his kitchen, it felt cozy. We poured wine. We talked about work, about how weird it felt not having Amanda around. Somewhere between the first glass and the second, the conversation shifted. You and Amanda are lucky, I said, twirling the stem of my glass. You still seem connected. Daniel and I trailed off. Chris tilted his head. What about you and Daniel? I shrugged. We're fine. Just fine. He didn't press, but there was something in his eyes. Something that made me feel like he saw right through me. We laughed about something stupid, a story Amanda had told us about her first job, and for a moment, I forgot he was her husband. He was just a man, sitting across from me, making me feel interesting again. When I stood to leave, he walked me to the door. I turned to say goodbye, and before I could register what was happening, he leaned in. It wasn't a long kiss, just a brush of lips, but it was enough. Enough to make my heart slam against my ribs. Enough to make me freeze and then, shamefully, lean forward instead of stepping back. When I pulled away, my voice was shaky. We can't. Chris, we can't do that. I know, he said, his voice low. I'm sorry. But the look in his eyes told me he wasn't sorry. Not really. I told myself it was nothing. A slip. A moment of bad judgment. But that night, lying next to Daniel, I replayed it in my head more times than I want to admit. The following Monday, I stopped by Chris's place again. I told myself it was just to check in, but when he opened the door, I felt that same pull in my chest. We sat in the living room this time. No wine, just coffee. But coffee turned into a movie. A movie turned into sitting closer. And sitting closer turned into our knees touching, then our hands then. I can't stop thinking about that kiss, he murmured. And then he kissed me again. This time, I didn't resist at all. Over the next week, the boundaries dissolved completely. It was never planned. He'd text, "Are you free?" Or, "Made too much food. Come help me eat it." And I'd go. Sometimes we just talked. Sometimes it was more. But every time, I left with guilt curling in my stomach and adrenaline buzzing through my veins. When Amanda called from her hotel, I'd chat like everything was normal. "How's Chris?" she'd ask. "He's fine," I'd say, my voice steady even as my mind flashed to the way he'd kissed me the night before. The third week, Chris pushed it further. "You ever think about what this would be like if it wasn't wrong?" he asked one night. I stared at him. "You're married to my best friend." "And you're married too," he said. "But that doesn't change how I feel when I'm with you." I swallowed hard. This has to stay between us. No one can ever know. He nodded, but I knew we were on a slope we couldn't stop sliding down. The day before Amanda was due to return, Chris texted me in the afternoon. Come by tonight. One last time before everything goes back to normal. It should have been my chance to walk away, but instead I said yes. Only this time, I told him to come to my place. Daniel was supposed to be working a late shift. The idea felt dangerous, reckless, and that danger was exactly what made it irresistible. Chris came over just after sunset. We cooked together in my kitchen, laughing quietly like teenagers sneaking around. We touched more than we needed to, brushing shoulders, hands lingering when passing utensils. By the time we finished eating, the air between us was thick. I leaned back against the counter, and he stepped closer. "You know this is insane," I whispered. "I know," he said, and then his mouth was on mine. "If you've ever taken that one step you swore you'd never take, you know how it feels, the rush, the heat, the absolute blindness to what comes next." That night, I wasn't thinking about Amanda. I wasn't thinking about Daniel. I was thinking about how alive I felt, and how I hadn't felt that in years. And that was the first mistake, believing the feeling was worth the risk. If you've ever felt temptation breathing down your neck, you know how dangerous it is. Like and subscribe if you want to hear how quickly this spiraled out of control, because in my case, it ended with the last person I ever wanted to hurt standing in my kitchen, watching it all fall apart. The night Chris came to my house should have been the end. It should have been the point where I realized just how deep into this mess I was and walked away before it was too late. But affairs aren't neat like that. They don't dissolve because you know they're wrong. They feed on secrecy, on the thrill of what you're not supposed to have, and by the time you see the danger, you're already in too deep. The morning after, I woke up next to Daniel. He had come home late from work, smelling like concrete dust and gasoline. I pretended to be half asleep when he crawled into bed, wrapping an arm loosely over my waist. The moment his breathing slowed into sleep, I stared at the wall, guilt pounding in my chest. I had been with another man, my best friend's husband, in the same kitchen where my husband was now sleeping just feet away. And yet, even as shame chewed at my gut, I couldn't stop replaying the way Chris had looked at me the night before. The way his hand had lingered on my hip when I leaned against the counter. The way his voice had dropped when he told me he didn't want the night to end. Amanda returned that weekend. She texted me from the airport. "Amanda, home. Chris is picking me up. Can't wait to see you this week." I stared at her message, my stomach twisting. I told myself it would be different now. I would put it behind me. Chris and I would go back to being nothing more than friends by association. And for a few days I tried, but then he messaged me again. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Daniel was working late. Amanda was at a conference for the day. "Chris, I can't stop thinking about you." I typed back. "Me. We said we'd stop." He replied instantly. "Chris, you don't want to." "Neither do I." My hands shook as I set the phone down. I paced the kitchen, arguing with myself. But by the time the clock hit 4 p.m., I was already in my car, driving to his place. The first few times we'd been together, there was hesitation. A pause before the kiss. A quick glance toward the door. That day, there was none of that. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. We both knew why I was there. It was fast, urgent, almost frantic, like we were trying to make up for the days we'd stayed apart. And afterward, when we were lying there in the quiet, I realized something that terrified me. I didn't feel done. I wanted him again. Over the next 2 weeks, we found excuses to see each other. Sometimes it was coffee in the morning after Daniel left for work. Sometimes it was an errand I pretended to run in the middle of the day. Sometimes it was when Amanda was at her yoga class and Daniel was at the gym. The lies became second nature. "I'm going to help Amanda with something." "I'm running to Target." "I have a headache. I'm going to lie down for a bit." And in those hours, I wasn't a wife. I wasn't Amanda's best friend. I was just a woman being looked at like she was wanted. The guilt didn't go away. It followed me like a shadow. Every time Amanda called to vent about work, I heard my own voice betraying her in the background of my mind. Every time Daniel asked how my day had been, I could feel the heat of the lies rolling off my tongue. But then Chris would text me, "Thinking of you. Wish you were here." And the guilt would drown under the pull of wanting to be wanted. One rainy afternoon, Chris came to my house again. Daniel was supposed to be out of town for a 2-day job. Amanda was visiting her sister. It felt safe. We made coffee. We laughed about something ridiculous Amanda had posted on Facebook. He leaned against the counter, watching me move around the kitchen like he belonged there. "You know," he said, "I could get used to this." I turned to look at him. "Don't." But the smile on my face didn't match the warning in my voice. That afternoon turned into evening. The rain came harder, drumming against the windows. The whole world outside felt far away, like it couldn't touch us. I told myself it was just this once more. Just one more day before I pulled away for good. But the thing about just once more is that it never means what you think it does. When Chris left that night, I stood in the doorway and watched him walk to his car, headlights cutting through the wet dark. I shut the door and leaned against it, the weight of what I was doing pressing down on me. And yet, I still didn't stop. If you've ever been tangled in something you know will end badly, you know how it feels. The push and pull, the guilt battling with the thrill, the constant promise to yourself that you'll quit tomorrow. That was me. Every day, I promised myself I'd end it. Every day, I broke that promise. And I had no idea how close I was to the moment when everything would explode. Because the truth was about to walk straight into my kitchen. If you've ever thought you could hide a secret forever, think again. Like and subscribe if you want to hear how this affair ended, because in my case, it ended with the door opening and my whole life falling apart in one breath. Some moments are so sharp they cut through the haze of memory, even years later. The sound of the front door clicking open that afternoon, that was one of them. It was supposed to be safe. Amanda was out of town again for the weekend, visiting her parents. Daniel had told me he'd be working late. Pouring concrete. Might not be home until after midnight, he'd said over breakfast. Chris had texted that morning. "Chris, your place today?" I hesitated. It had been a few days since we'd last seen each other. I'd been trying to keep my distance, to calm the constant hum of guilt in my chest. But the thought of him in my kitchen again, leaning against the counter like he belonged there, pushed everything else aside. Me, come by around 2. When he arrived, it felt like every other time. We made coffee. I leaned on the counter, watching him pour sugar into his mug. We were relaxed, smiling, maybe too relaxed. He was in a t-shirt, hair still damp from a shower, his cologne just faint enough to catch when he leaned close to hand me my cup. "Daniel still working late?" he asked casually. "Yeah," I said, sipping my coffee. "He won't be home until..." The sound of the front door latch snapping open froze the air between us. My first thought was that I'd imagined it. My second was that maybe it was a delivery. But then I heard it, the unmistakable shuffle of boots on the hardwood. "Babe!" Daniel's voice called from the front hall. My stomach dropped to the floor. My coffee cup rattled against the counter as I set it down. Chris's eyes widened. "I thought you said..." "I did," I hissed, panic rising in my throat. "You need to." But there was no time. Daniel stepped into the kitchen doorway, still wearing his work jacket, dust smeared on his jeans. His gaze flicked from me to Chris, to the fact that Chris was standing there with his shirt clinging damply to him, coffee in hand, like he lived there. And me! My hair was mussed, my cheeks flushed, and my robe, was tied haphazardly around me over yesterday's tank top and shorts. The room went dead quiet. Daniel's face didn't twist into rage. It didn't crumple into hurt. It went still, cold, like someone had poured ice water into his veins. "What's going on here?" His voice was low, measured. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Chris shifted uncomfortably, setting his mug down on the counter. "Daniel, don't." Daniel's eyes cut to him sharply, and Chris went silent. Daniel turned back to me. "So this is what you do when I'm at work." "Daniel, it's not." "Don't lie to me, Alyssa." The weight of his gaze was unbearable. My chest tightened, my throat dry. "It's not what it looks like," I whispered, even though I knew how pathetic it sounded. "Really?" His laugh was sharp and humorless. "Because it looks exactly like my wife's been screwing her best friend's husband in our kitchen." Chris winced. I felt my legs weaken beneath me. "I should go," Chris muttered, grabbing his jacket from the back of the chair. Daniel's eyes followed him like a hawk. "Get out, before I do something I regret." Chris didn't argue. The front door clicked shut behind him, and the silence he left was suffocating. Daniel just stood there, staring at me. I'd almost preferred him yelling. At least then I could have yelled back, defended myself, even if it was hollow. This quiet was worse. "How long?" he asked finally. My lips parted. A few weeks. He exhaled slowly, like he was trying to keep himself from exploding. A few weeks, he repeated. So what was the plan, Alyssa? Keep screwing him until Amanda figured it out? Until I walked in on you like this? I shook my head quickly. It wasn't planned. It just happened. It just happened. He repeated my words with disgust. You don't trip and fall into someone's bed. You choose it. Over and over. And you chose him. Tears blurred my vision. I'm sorry. He shook his head. No, you're sorry you got caught. There's a difference. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The sound of the refrigerator humming was the only thing between us. Then he stepped forward, closing the distance until he was only a foot away. His eyes were sharp, but there was pain there too, deep, raw, and still bleeding. You were my wife, he said quietly. My person. And you broke that. For him. He scoffed. God, Alyssa, for him? I covered my face with my hands, sobbing. I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know why. He cut me off. No. You don't get to play confused. You knew exactly what you were doing. He turned toward the hallway. I can't even look at you right now. Daniel, please, don't leave. I'm not leaving, he said, his voice flat. But I'm not staying here with you either. Not tonight. The sound of the front door opening and closing echoed like a gavel. And just like that, the kitchen was empty again. I sank to the floor, my back against the cabinets, tears hot on my cheeks. My hands shook as I stared at the coffee mug still sitting on the counter, mine half empty, his barely touched. The same mugs Daniel and I used every morning. It hit me then that this was the kitchen where I had kissed my husband for the first time after we bought the house, where we danced barefoot after dinner, where I just destroyed everything that mattered. If you've ever been caught in the moment you thought you'd hidden perfectly, you know the way the air changes. You know that sick drop in your stomach when you realize the lies are over and the truth is in the room, staring you in the face. If this moment has you holding your breath, like and subscribe, because what came next wasn't just the end of an affair. It was the end of my marriage, my friendship, and the person I thought I was. It's strange how a house can feel different overnight. The same walls, the same furniture, the same kitchen table. But after Daniel walked out that evening, our home didn't feel like ours anymore. It felt like a crime scene. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with the lights off, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing outside. My phone stayed silent on the coffee table. No texts from Daniel. No calls from Chris. The silence was louder than any fight could have been. By morning, I told myself maybe Daniel just needed time to cool off. Maybe he'd come back ready to talk, ready to hear me explain, though even I didn't know what I'd say. But when I walked into the kitchen, there was a folded piece of paper on the counter. No, good morning. No, we'll talk later. Just 6 words scrawled in Daniel's handwriting. I can't do this right now. Amanda came back into town 2 days later. I'd avoided calling her. I didn't know how much Chris had told her, or if he had told her at all. But the pit in my stomach told me she knew. I was making coffee when my phone rang. Her name lit up the screen. My heart pounded in my ears as I answered. Amanda! Don't, she said, her voice sharp. Don't act like you didn't know this was coming. I closed my eyes. I'm sorry. Sorry. Her laugh was bitter. You slept with my husband, Alyssa. My husband. Do you have any idea what you've done to me? To my marriage? To our friendship? Tears burned my eyes. I know. No, she snapped. You don't get to say you know. You don't get to claim regret when you were in it for weeks. God, Alyssa, I trusted you more than anyone. I tried to find words, but every one I reached for sounded hollow. I don't ever want to see you again, she said finally. And if Daniel has any sense, he won't either. The line went dead. That was the day I realized this wasn't just about my marriage. I hadn't only betrayed my husband. I had destroyed the one friendship that had been constant for a decade. I had detonated 2 relationships at once, hers and mine, for something that was never going to last. Daniel stayed away for a week. He came back only to grab more of his clothes, moving quickly through the house like I was a stranger. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom as he packed. Daniel, please, I said softly. Can't we talk? Please. He didn't look at me. Talk about what? How you let him into our house. Our kitchen. Into you. His voice cracked on that last word, but he kept shoving clothes into his duffel bag. I made a mistake. A mistake, he repeated, zipping the bag. That's your word for it. I call it a choice. A choice you made over and over again. I stepped forward, tears sliding down my face. I miss you. I miss us. He paused at the door. You miss what you threw away. And then he was gone again. Chris never reached out after that day in the kitchen. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that Amanda had kicked him out, and that he was staying with his brother. There was a time when I might have felt a pang of longing for him, but now all I felt was disgust. Not at him, but at myself. I had let loneliness and attention blind me to what I already had. And the worst part, the thing Chris gave me, that rush, that spark, was already gone. What was left was nothing but wreckage. I tried going back to work, but I couldn't concentrate. My coworkers noticed the change. I was quieter, distracted, jumpy every time my phone buzzed. The truth was, I was afraid of every notification. Afraid it was Daniel's lawyer. Afraid it was Amanda telling me off one more time. Afraid it was no one at all. Nights were the worst. The bed felt enormous without Daniel in it. I'd curl up on one side, staring at the wall, replaying every decision that had led me here. If I had just said no that first night, if I had just walked out of Chris's kitchen, if I had just told Daniel I was lonely instead of finding someone else to fill the space. But if doesn't fix anything. After a month, Daniel finally agreed to meet me at a cafe to talk. I almost didn't go. The irony of meeting in a cafe, the kind of place where temptation starts, wasn't lost on me. He was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window with a black coffee. His eyes were tired, his hair a little messier than usual. I sat down across from him. Thank you for coming. He didn't respond. I want to tell you that I'm sorry. Not because I got caught, but because I hurt you. I hurt us, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. He stared at his coffee. Do you love him? I shook my head quickly. No, it wasn't love. I exhaled. It was attention. It was feeling seen. And I hate myself for needing it from the wrong person. He finally looked at me, and the pain in his eyes nearly undid me. You could have asked me for that. You could have told me you needed more. I know, I whispered. And I didn't. And I'm so sorry. We sat in silence for a long moment. I'm filing for divorce, he said quietly. I don't think I can ever look at you the same way again. I felt the words like a punch, but I didn't argue. I knew he was right. The divorce was final 2 months later. Amanda never spoke to me again. Chris moved out of town. And me. I stayed in the same house for a while, surrounded by ghosts. Every time I walked into the kitchen, I could still see Daniel standing there, catching me in the act. Every time I passed Amanda's old text messages, I felt the sharp sting of what I'd lost. Eventually, I sold the house and moved into a small apartment across town. It's quieter there, smaller, easier to keep clean. But no matter how much I scrub, I can't wash away the truth of what I did. If you've stayed with me through this whole story, I need you to hear me clearly. It's not worth it. That rush you feel when someone new looks at you, it's fleeting. It's nothing compared to the devastation of watching the people who truly loved you walk away. I thought I could handle the secret. I thought I could balance the thrill with the guilt. But the truth is, the guilt always wins. The lie always rots. And when it finally comes out, it doesn't just take away what you had, it takes away who you were. So if you're standing at the edge of that choice right now, don't take the step. If this story hit you in the gut, like and subscribe for more raw, unfiltered confessions and cautionary tales. Share this with someone who needs to hear it before they make a choice they can't take back. Because I can tell you from experience, once you cross that line, you never get to go back.